Byron C Clark is a disinformation and misinformation researcher who had a great afternoon on Friday watching the January 6th committees. I'm sure. Did you watch them with a beer, Byron, with a notepad? How did you ingest that information?
I watched them. The idea was to have it on in the background. I'd taken the afternoon off to do some writing for the book I'm working on, but then started that and suddenly saw that they were about to go live with this hearing, and it didn't really end up being background viewing because it was quite compelling. So
yeah. So for people who didn't see it, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have seen highlights on the news, but like the first hour and a half, they just basically set the case, and it was like, holy crap, all this footage that hadn't been seen before and all these statements that hadn't been seen, and all of a sudden someone would pop up on the screen like literally Ivanka Trump, and I think we've got some of that footage as well, with her saying, yes, I believe William Barr, that my father did lose the election, and just point after point after point. As I said a few minutes ago, you can see why Fox News did not want to carry it, especially when there was Hannity text messages also coming up in the I guess evidence, the opening statement, whatever you'd call it, from the January 6th committee. What did you get out of watching it, Byron?
I felt it was really making the case that Trump had encouraged this. Trump is the reason this happened, and I think he's going to be really arguing that that he just gave a speech and didn't actually say go and try and overthrow democracy. But you look at what he was doing and claiming the election was stolen, this whole stop the steal thing. And I think if you've got somebody who is your leader, your president, who you've elected, who is making these speeches saying the election was stolen, I'm the rightful president, you would then believe that stopping the transition of power was a morally justified thing to do. Yeah. And I'll be watching closely to see what the consequences are for Donald Trump, whether there are any consequences or whether he'll have another tilt at the presidency in 2024 and what that might look like.
I mean, I watched bits and pieces of it, and I mean, for a start, I just thought the production values were incredible. The whole thing was put together like a Hollywood legal thriller, and got the ratings to go with it. They had 19 million people watching that first hour, which is actually really encouraging in a way. But Byron, you might be able to answer this, or you might not. Can this committee actually do anything, or is this the committee that is going to lead to people deciding whether they're going to indict him on criminal? He could be indicted on federal criminal charges. That's kind of like the ultimate end game, right?
Yeah, well, I haven't been following the legal sides of it too closely, right. But I think it'll move slowly, whatever happens. And this is just
of course.
Early stages of it.
This is just the show. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Maybe one of the big questions also is, I mean, not even necessarily around the legalities, what will happen to Trump, is will it make any difference, for example, in the midterms? What do people think? Because I don't know. I know, look, I spoke to sort of a conservative right-winger on Friday night for 2 hours and 40 minutes. We talked. And you can just see how much brainwashing there is in there. And no matter what you put before people or what you say, they still come back to the conclusion that they want anyway. What I was going to get to is if I was a Republican voter in America, I would want to see this. But are the Fox viewers going to see this, or are they going to believe? Because Tucker Carlson said literally on his show that they ran ad-free on the night. They ran them ad-free to make sure no one had a chance to flick over. That's why they did it, because we flick in the ads, you see, so they made them ad-free and then no one flicked off. He said, they are lying to you. That's literally what Tucker Carlson said on the night that these things were happening. So what do you guys think? Will it make any difference at all?
Yeah, I mean, the whole Tucker Carlson thing has really shown, it's just really further emphasised that we're living in this post-truth age now, and there's a section of the Republican Party in the US behind Donald Trump who still believe the election was stolen. Many of them believe that the January 6th insurrection was some sort of false flag, or it was Antifa infiltrators or whatever. And I don't think that even if they were to watch this whole hearing that would sway them. I guess in terms of how it could impact the midterms, it will come down to that more moderate wing of the Republican Party, whether they are still going to be prepared to look the other way on their more extreme wing, or whether it's going to be a case of them actually, challenging that and saying, we don't want to be the Trumpist Republican Party. We want to be, something more like, more of a moderate centre-right party.
More of the
Yeah,
Mitt Romney party.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
I think I'd agree with you. I mean, I think the midterm elections they're like elections basically anywhere right at the moment, which are, both sides have a hardcore who aren't going to budge regardless of what they see. It's that middle ground that you're chasing, and unfortunately in the US, I mean, the numbers have shown in the last couple of elections, the way the middle ground have often responded to things like this is just not turn up to vote. So if it does have an effect on the midterm, if it motivates even a small proportion of those middle ground people to decide that their vote counts, then that could well be a positive thing in itself. But no, Byron, like you say, I think it's going forward. It'll be interesting to see how it affects the Trumpists' hold on the Republican Party, because right at the moment he is very much, maybe not in name, but certainly in personality and in policy, the leader of that party. And if this encourages, as you say, some of those more moderate voters who do exist, by the way. I know we spend a lot of time bashing the Republicans on this show, and I do in my everyday life as well. But there are moderate Republicans out there. They really have been and they love using, Republicans love using this phrase, but they have been the silent majority in that party. So with a bit of luck, this might get a few more of them to speak out. Only time will tell.
Well, I think the other thing is, we're talking about those moderates in the Republican Party, is often those people may also be sort of singular issue voters as well. And whilst they look at someone like Trump and they kind of roll their eyes and they go, oh God, he doesn't represent us, they go Roe versus Wade. They go, anti-abortion. They go, my gun's freedom. And even though they might think that he is a bit of a tool, they go, he's the one, even though he's a tool, that's going to, or whoever the Republican is, who's going to get through my one or two things that I agree with, even though the other 20 things that he stands for I don't. And they don't seem to be able to, it's funny, especially that part of politics which is, invokes the word Christian and invokes the word conservative, but when it comes to moral choices, they seem to be able to put their morality to the side very easily if they can get through their guns and their, pro-life agenda sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, again, I mean, I would argue that I think, again, those people probably won't change their mind. They're probably part of that hardcore that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are people who vote Republican for the same reasons that people vote National here or vote Tory in the UK. They think they're better for the economy. They, whether rightfully or wrongfully, they see them as the party of the economy, the party of strength, of economic strength, military strength, whatever you like, going forward. And, some of them are turned off by any of those issues that you just mentioned, but particularly by Trump. But they have been drowned out recently. They've been completely drowned out by the people who have latched onto Trump's entire agenda, or even just the small parts of it, such as immigration, foreign relations, those things. So that's who I'm talking about when I'm talking about moderate Republicans. Kind of run-of-the-mill center right voters, the kind of
normal
person
people.
normal people who lean slightly to the right from me.
Hey Byron, I'd like to ask you a little bit about what we're going to talk about later on today, but
Sure.
George has got a few clips queued up. George, do you want to come back in, because you can set them up for us and tell us what we're looking at as well?
So this one sort of is a reflection of what you're talking about before, with basically people turning up because they personally felt that Trump was telling them to turn up.
Now we're going to hear it from the rioters themselves. Without objection, I include in the record a video presentation.
What really made me want to come was the fact that I had supported Trump all that time. I did believe, that the election was being stolen. And Trump asked us to come.
He personally asked for us to come to D.C. that day. And I thought, for everything he's done for us, if this is the only thing he's going to ask of me, I'll do it.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Did you recall President Trump mentioning going to the Capitol during his speech?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of my disappointments. He said he was going to go and go with us, that he was going to be there.
I know why I was there, and that's because he called me there and he laid out what is happening in our government.
Wow.
He laid it out.
But I remember Donald Trump telling people to be there, right? I mean, to support.
So you mentioned that the president asked you. Do you remember a specific message?
Basically, yeah, he asked for us to come to D.C., that big things are going to happen.
What got me interested, he said, I have something very important to say on January 6th or something like that. Is what got me interested to be there.
Trump has only asked me for two things. He asked me for my vote, and he asked me to come on January 6th.
Just on that video, though, I mean, like, I think we all kind of know that there was some subtext here to what Trump was saying, but I don't think he can be held accountable for what happened at the actual building because of what he has said. I mean, they all said, come to the Capitol, come to DC, but to then make that leap, and I'm not saying he wasn't stoked with what was going on. Obviously, as part of that January 6th committee, it came out that he was watching TV and, eating popcorn basically, but I'm just thinking in a setting where they need to prove it, I think it's going to be a long bow to prove that he's culpable for them entering the building, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think certainly from that legal standpoint, he's got plausible deniability there. He can say, like, he can continue to say he believes the election was fraudulent, but he can say, look, we were wanting to have a peaceful demonstration. I never asked them to breach the building and so on. I mean, unless we get some evidence out that shows that he was encouraging that, or that he was working with some of these militia groups like the Proud Boys, which we probably won't see that because they are pretty distant from him. Really, I don't think any of these groups had a direct line to Trump, but they were encouraged by him, but probably weren't collaborating with him. So if there are any legal consequences for Trump, it'll probably be more around his antics in terms of trying to get votes recounted and anything that went along with that, rather than the actual events of the day that the transition of power was going to happen.
Yeah,
there is a certain legal precedent in U.S. law. I mean, it's the old line, but it's actually entrenched in law. It's the idea of yelling fire in a crowded theater, whereas your actions can be judged if depending on what you reasonably thought would happen. And if they could prove that he asked all these people to come to DC and his rhetoric, if they could somehow prove that, well, what did you reasonably think that was going to happen? But again, it's a very difficult thing, firstly for that, but also opening up this legal precedent that if you do indict a president, even an ex-president, which has never happened, criminally indict rather than impeach, it does open this door for a tit-for-tat thing where suddenly, every party for the next 20 years is going to be trying to indict the other person's president, which is, I think, something that they're very wary of. That politics are certainly not going away just because this is a criminal and/or congressional hearing.
The difference will be in that, though, is if he gets held up on some criminal charge, that's a very different. You can't really tit for tat in criminal charges. You can on the indictment, political kind of tomfoolery. But if it was to be criminal, but I mean, Carl kind of says something what you were just saying about as well, is there will be no consequences of Donald Trump. It would go against their unspoken policy of not prosecuting previous administrations. That's a history of Contras, WMDs, etc., etc. So that's sort of that idea.
It's a very fair point. Yep.
Nixon did crimes, and they sort of brushed that aside and sort of for the greater good, I guess.
Well, he resigned before he could be criminal indicted, and then he got pardoned. Yeah, Gerald Ford pardoned.
Yeah, the pardon.
The way it was weird.
Have we got some more? A couple more short videos there or something, George? We just rip through them.
Yep. All right. We have. This was the Ivanka one. This is Ivanka talking about her conversations with Barr.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
Okay, so
and then basically a post here from her father, sort of saying, you know, she wasn't across this stuff. Right? She wasn't across conversations with Bill Barr.
Senior advisor at the White House wasn't across this stuff.
Yeah.
could be a problem in itself, but yeah.
The other video was from Liz Cheney. I don't know if we read. It's sort of the polemics at the end of her.
How long is it?
Her speech, 2 minutes.
Nah,
or 3 minutes.
She basically.
I do
slammed
wonder
him.
I do wonder if basically, you know, aside from the legal issues here, it's basically a Republican Party sort of reconfiguring itself in a post-Trump sort of era, right? You have the sort of Liz Cheneys who are seen as the sensible Republicans, even though they're far from it, sort of trying to take the reins. But I think they'll find that there's still a sort of very popular sentiment in the Republican Party, and that people like her maybe will not be around in Congress for long.
Is it a post-Trump era though? I mean,
no, but they want to make it that. People like Cheney
gotcha.
do. Yeah. They want the old moderate Republican Party.
And that'll be the thing is, depending what happens at the midterms and depending what happens at the next election, if they can get away from Trump, then all these people who are current Trump supporters will just swing back to whoever the moderate is, and they'll appear more moderate.
I sort of take that back. Maybe they don't want a post-Trump. Maybe because I mean, you know, she was happy, well, for the most part, while Trump was there. You know, the tax cuts come through. They can sort of, you know, guide foreign policy here and there when Trump's in power, or someone like Trump's in power. I mean, it's a balance, I guess.
Let's ask Byron this as well, so we don't call him all night, keep him here all night. This is a conversation we're going to be talking on later tonight, Byron. It's a new story from the weekend. Threats against the Prime Minister triple, according to report. This is threats against Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern have tripled over the last 3 years. News Hub, citing information released under the OIO, reports that threats for Ardern have tripled, yada yada. It's understood that anti-COVID-19 vaccination sentiment for contributing factor, along with opposition to the government's firearms crackdown after March 15 terror attacks in Christchurch. So it's that same sector of society that we're kind of seeing the New Zealand version of the ones that are storming the building over in the US, that they seem to be holding accountable for these death threats against the PM. You're a disinformation researcher. You've been looking, especially around those Wellington protests and stuff. What can you speak to this to let us know about why we're seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's not surprising to see those numbers going up. I mean, you know, 2019, 2020, 2021. You look at what's happened over those years with you know, the Christchurch shooting, and then the firearms buyback, and then the whole pandemic and all the conspiracy theories around, you know, vaccines and everything, and all the sort of adjacent stuff to that about Ardern being a puppet of the UN or the World Economic Forum, all these ridiculous things that make their way around dark corners of the internet that are, you know, have more people than we'd like to think. It's really similar to like I was saying about Trump before. I mean, if you really believe in your leaders telling you the election was rigged, and you know the true democratic leader is Trump, you're going to believe you're morally justified to try and stop the transfer of power. And these people here really believe that, you know, Ardern is 1 minute away from declaring herself a dictator, or that she is facilitating genocide through the COVID vaccine. If you really believe that, you might start to think that you're some sort of a freedom fighter and a socialist tyranny or whatever. And so to see these escalating threats is, you know, it makes sense within the logic of that conspiracy theorist mindset.
This was a hand delivered to a bunch of houses. I can't remember which town it was, but it was a small town in New Zealand beginning with H. I was going to say Hokianga. I don't want to paint them in a bad brush, but it was delivered to a bunch of houses in a small town. And for those who are listening, it's a handwritten note that says, very soon a group of us are going to eradicate Jacinda Ardern from this earth plane for good. She is killing our people and our means to live a fair, happy, normal life. She is done. Bye-bye, Jacinda, very soon. So there's a pretty horrifically graphic example of what some, whether it's 100 or 1,000 people, think is the solution to what's going on at the moment. All right. Hey, Byron, thanks for joining us tonight. As always, it's been a great pleasure to have you on board. Are you have you got, like, they call it TiVo in America, have you got Mice Guide, the rest of the January 6th committee? Are you going to be catching up on it and watching it each time?
Yeah, I'm gonna when I find the time, we'll be watching the rest of it there.